there is this thing about classical conditioning that once you associate two co-occurring events, it doesn't really have to matter what kind of event. But let's talk about Pavlov and
Right.
the bell
The
and the
famous
dog.
one.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. I'm Dr. Tom, psychiatrist, specialist in neurodiversity. I'm a neurodiversity advocate, and this channel has a clear, unapologetic stance in defense of neurodiverse people. No BS, no virtue signaling, just solid, honest content grounded in science, lived experience, and real-world relevance. If you're tired of cliches and want strong, actionable ideas that challenge stigma, clarify concepts, and empower neurodivergent individuals and allies alike, you are in the right place. True rejection, the one you experienced in the past, is co-occurring with the silence treatment that you're getting right now, being ghosted by someone. There's no way that you're going to be capable of differentiating this two situations just because of the pure power and force of your logical brain because you're such an amazing human. It really doesn't matter what kind of IQ you have. It doesn't really matter how much of training you had in psychology. It doesn't really matter if you're on meds. If you're conditioned, if you're trained to feel what you're feeling because of a true past event, you're going to feel that. Sure. And I'm pretty sure you remember the fact that when we do the Pavlovian experiment, so for those of our listeners that are not aware of it, but what Pavlov did is that he associated a bell that he rang with presenting food to dogs. And what he found out is by doing this, the dogs started salivating just by ringing the bell. You didn't even need to present the food. And we now know that if we measure the neurons, the firing and the liberation of dopamine in the dog's brain, we know that the release of dopamine already happens when they ring the bell. So the conditioning is enough to produce the real reaction. So this dopamine spike is larger than the one that they feel when they actually eat the food. This also means that conditioning works the same way. You don't really need the food to produce the dopamine spike. That also means that you don't really need the rejection to produce the neurotoxic neurotransmitters, be that norepinephrine, be that glutamate or GABA. You're already gonna have the liberation. We could measure that if you get into the context of the conditioned context, you're already gonna have the release and you're gonna feel it for real, because in terms of what the brain does, it is real.
Sure. And talking about training, I mean, in Pavlov's case, it was a positive training, ring a bell, present a treat, food in this case. But talking about training for native, kind of the digital connection with all that, I feel like the bell ringing, or in digital cases, the blue check mark with red messages, things like that, are much more, the quantity of them is much higher now than before. So are we training ourselves to be rejected more because we have more opportunity for it with like digital age and like communication, how it is now?
So there is a twofold way of understanding your question, because but there's a really cool take on this. When you're asking if we're training ourselves to be rejected, I feel like you're mostly talking about the negative idea of that. But I feel like the opposite is also true, because actually the dog is capable of unlearning, and we call it extinction. So by not presenting the food for a prolonged period, for a few episodes, many episodes actually, the dog is capable of unlearning that there is a conditioning, and you do unlearn the context. So what we need ideally for the counseling, the therapeutic effect, is to associate that same context, the stimulus, the condition, with a corrective experience. So in the example I gave right now is like when the boss responds 24 hours later, you're capable of at least partly unlearn what your experience used to be. And by being exposed constantly to social media that does put you in the situation of possibly unlearning or, learning to be rejected, you might get corrective experiences that will actually end up helping yourself and helping your personal experience. So there is when you are capable of exposing yourself to a trigger or a context or situation that induces anxiety, and you can manage not to respond to that trigger. That's called exposure and prevention of response. If you can manage to do that, you're going to get habituated to the situation you're experiencing. So, in other words, if you're starting to get accustomed to the fact that people are not responding to you, and you can prevent your response, be that anger or mood disturbance or depression or or any impulsive behavior, you are eventually gonna unlearn what you've learned in the past.
Okay. So there's a thing I saw recently. It was on one of my feeds. This guy, he called his page was something about rejection therapy. It was interesting. He went every day. He would go to a new place, a store, something in the neighborhood, but it would be with a stranger, not a situation that he set up. And he would ask them for something that he knew they couldn't do on purpose. And sometimes it would be he would go to a bar, not a bar, a cafe, coffee bar. And he would ask the person behind the desk, I want so-and-so coffee. Can I make it with you? Can you show me how to make it? And, if you go to Starbucks and you say that, they're going to look at you and be like, you're crazy.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Get off my lawn.
And so he was putting himself in a situation where he was facing rejection constantly, but sometimes he would go to like a coffee shop that was smaller, more privately owned, and they'd be like, it's weird, but yeah, let's go. And the reaction from the guy was much more energetic, much more enthusiastic. He was expecting rejection, but when he didn't get rejection, it was a happier response. It was an interesting experiment, I think, because
it's a corrective experience.
Yeah. If you go up and talk to someone in a grocery store randomly, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be an awkward interaction and maybe nothing comes of it. But maybe that one reaction is so good, it outweighs the negative. So finding corrective experiences is really cool, but really hard. Like the motivation to do it. That guy, I mean, I wish I had his motivation to go and be like, yeah, I'm going to like put myself in a situation where I know I'm going to be rejected. Not many people can do that.
There's something really similar that's called assertiveness training. And maybe the one distinction that's crucial is that in assertiveness training, we try to ask assertively for things that are possible. Okay. So that might include something along the lines of, I want this or that, but I've changed my mind. I need to give this back. Okay. So one thing that I've learned through my assertiveness training, and I lived through just last week when watching the F1 movie, I wanted zero Coke, but I got regular Coke. And I already went into the actual screening, and this is when I found out that I got regular Coke, and I felt fuck, it's 1 liter of calories that I don't want. And I would have never done that 20 years ago, but I went back to the counter and said, hey, this was meant to be zero, but I got regular, could you change it? And she, sure, no problem at all, zero problem. I lost parts of the movie, but I'd rather do that than have 1K calorie surplus for no reason. But in assertiveness training, this is really important, and we give a few examples about how that works. The one example I really love is that assertiveness is really and truly the best outcome for everyone. And this is in the restaurant, and here in Brazil, we have lots of different fruits, right? And then you can ask for many different kinds of juices that are juiced for you on the spot. And if you get, let's say, orange juice, OJ, you're asking the server to bring you OJ, but he ends up bringing you lemon juice. And you might not like that because it's quite a different experience from OJ. And then you just end up drinking your lemon juice, even though you've wanted OJ. And then the person next to you at the next table gets your gets your orange juice, but he's the one that actually wanted the lemon juice that you're drinking. And then that person that's right next to you tells the server, hey, but I asked for orange juice, right? And then the server turns to you and says, why didn't you tell me anything? I got you the two of you have the wrong order, and I've lost 2 orders. So by being assertive at the right moment, and assertive by definition is the right kind of communication, just right between passive and aggressive, you are capable of getting the best outcome for everyone. So the restaurant example is one that I really enjoy because it shows that very clearly that you're actually not helping the person that you're trying to protect by not saying anything. So RSD has some very serious consequences. We have alluded to most of those already, but it's really good to put it into words and make sure we have a better framework for understanding what happens. So there's multiple consequences, and the most obvious is the one that you'll probably avoid exposing yourself to situations where you might live through some kind of rejection. There's different ways to go about this, but you could also try to oblige with any social imposition, or try to be a perfectionist, or be a people pleaser, or avoiding conflict, which would also help you reduce the chance of rejection. But obviously all of those are really bad decisions in terms of long-term outcome, because nobody is capable of being a perfectionist forever. And it's going to be really hard to keep that persona up for the people you feel like they only like you because you're a perfectionist, be that your teachers or parents or family members. But obviously, being a people pleaser is also something that will end up having negative consequences, because you're gonna avoid getting your fair share of whatever. So let's say you're splitting a bill and you didn't consume anything, or let's say you're negotiating whatever the equity of your business, or you're negotiating the monetization of a podcast, but because you are a people pleaser, you just don't take your fair share because you rather avoid the conflict than running the risk of being rejected.
Sure. Yeah.
So by considering the most important one, that's probably the most frequent, the avoiding exposure, avoiding social interaction. That's probably the most obvious to think about in terms of long-term consequences. If you're not comfortable of going on dates and trying to be with someone that might end up not working out for you, it's pretty obvious that you're probably going to have a high chance of not living a good or happy partnership. And within that partnership, again, if you're avoiding conflict, you're probably not going to be in a good spot to continue that partnership. And through no one's fault at all, this partnership is probably destined to fail just because of your avoidance. You're also going to avoid job interviews. You're gonna avoid opportunities of growing in life and getting a better pay. You're gonna avoid negotiating your loan. You're gonna avoid negotiating your salary. You're gonna avoid negotiating deadlines. You might find it hard to talk to a supervisor for your university classes. You might end up not doing the monography you need to do in time so you can actually graduate from college or med school or law school, whatever. And so there's multiple consequences that are pretty obvious, and they are pervasive in all parts of your life. Is really no way of just considering that this happens in one and not the other.
And a common, I guess, connection, it sounds like, is they're not sustainable.
Right, 100%. You might be capable of keeping up a fake relationship, or one that you perceive to be fake relationship, for a short period and then sustain it afterwards. This is really common. Oftentimes you feel like, okay, I'm really glad that I have a half an hour time limit to be with that person because I couldn't take it any longer, and then he's going to discover that I'm really fake, or that's just a persona that I'm putting up. And this is really, really very complicated because, in fact, all of us are putting up personas all the time, and be it due to social convention or not, we are limiting our impulsiveness and our desires all the time. So there's no reason for you to feel as an imposter if everyone is an imposter, right? So one thing that strikes me really commonly is when people say, okay, I've put up a Tinder profile, but I feel really bad about it because I've chosen the best pictures. But that's, of course, you're gonna choose the best pictures, right? You're not gonna, there's no reason for you to choose the worst pictures or even try to take pictures that put you in a less favorable light. Everybody's going to do that. That's the expected behavior. But still, if you are neurodiverse and you're experiencing RSD, you might feel like more of an imposter for doing that.
Interesting. Using Tinder and just social dating as an example for RSD and imposters and masking. I mean, all three of those, I think we could talk about in that one context. It's interesting because in my mind, I would say I need to find the best pictures so that I don't get rejected. But then, yeah, I could see living up to the standards of those best pictures would be the imposter part of it, where, okay, I'm making a profile, I put all my best pictures on there. This is me at my best. This is, I like to do X, Y, Z, even though it might not be something I like to do all the time. It's, I like to do X, Y, Z. I like walking along the beach. I like going to the park. Things sure, a normal person may enjoy, but it's not things that you do all the time. But you put them on there because they stand out as big things that people look for, right? So you pick the best pictures, you pick the best keywords, and then you put it up there, and then people match with that, and then you feel they're matching with an expectation of you that might not be you.
The artificial you, right? That's not true. That's not really you.
Right. Even though it is you, it's just not you every single day. So you feel like you're an imposter because you almost feel like that other person thinks that what they see is how you are every day. But that's not the case for anybody. Everybody, when they're on even not dating social media, but regular social media, is putting the best of everything.
Sure.
So not everyone can be at their best all the time, and you shouldn't expect the best all the time. That should be like, okay, that's awesome. We can hit that key point, but we're like, you got to expect a little bit lower, I guess.
There's a funny story about the girl Michelle Banana, the banana that most artificial banana flavoring has been used for. It's a real banana, but it's not really popular anymore because it got almost extinct in the 50s and 60s. So it's mostly substituted by other kinds of bananas that are not susceptible to that kind of bug that almost got it extinct. And I feel like if you're in that situation, you feel like you're posting your Gros Michel flavor, but you know it's just artificial, it's not true, and you're really just a Cavendish banana, but you might still be a Gros Michel.
Learning a lot about bananas. Yeah.
No pun intended.
Those keywords, like you're saying, like, you know, there's the rejection, so you make up an artificial version of yourself. You worry about matching up to that artificial version of yourself.
Yeah, there's a duality to that might end up making you back out of the person you matched to.
Sure.
Even not realizing that person also used their best side of it. Of course, there's no reason for you to show your worst side.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You almost create the version that you think everyone wants of you, and then to avoid the rejection of it, you might get matched with someone, but you might not pursue it because you're going, oh, that person matched the version I think the version I created that I think everyone wanted, not me, even though it's still you in the photos, it's still you doing all the things. It's just a curated version.
Sure.
So
very much ties into the perfectionist thing, right? When you put something on a social profile whatsoever, you're already, of course, obviously trying to put up the best version of yourself. And then you back up because you're not capable of sustaining that. Yeah. So the perfectionist trap also leads you to, in the end, to avoiding social interaction. Sure. And this is also true for friendships, of course. Like, you know, the one joke people make about, so you are a Slayer fan, tell me the middle name of the lead singer's great-great-grandma. Yeah.
Some random trivia.
Right, exactly. If you don't know that, you're not a real Slayer fan, right?
There's a episode of The Simpsons that I watched recently. Lisa created a website for the jazz singer that she's always a fan of. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm the most knowledgeable person about this jazz singer because I met him, we were friends, whatever. So she made a website, and then she goes on, I think it was a newscast, and it was a news report, but it was her and a lawyer was there, and the lawyer was asking her questions, like, to test her knowledge of that singer. And she went into crisis mode because he asked, like, what's the age of his oldest son? And she was like, I didn't even know he had a son. And then, like, her entire world crumbled because the whole time she's saying, I'm the most knowledgeable person about this thing. But the moment you present me with something I didn't know, oh my God, who am I? And it was like, that was the whole episode, was like her having this crisis of identity because she didn't know that one strange fact. She wasn't perfect.
Well, let me use this to talk about a concept of psychotherapy. It's called ACT, that's acceptance and commitment therapy. The creator, I want to say designer of ACT is Stephen Hayes, and he's got this TED talk where he goes on and on about how the human mind is capable of producing many thoughts and many thought processes that don't have any validity at all. So even us realizing that there is no reason for Lisa to have to know the age of his oldest son, there is no reason for her to know that he has sons whatsoever. There's no validity in yourself questioning your validity of a human being as well. So our mind is capable of thinking the entire time, and there is also and much of what our mind produces doesn't have any worth at all. So I'm a really big fan of Dr. Seuss, and there is this Cat in the Hat book that's not from the original series, but it's the Cat in the Hat. He's using that as a lexical series where the Cat in the Hat goes around and shows people about space, shows people about yoga, and there's this one about meditation, and there's one phrase that they put in there that I really like a lot and I use a lot in the therapy I conduct, which is our mind is a chatterbox nonstop. It just chatters, not much of which matters. And realizing that is so liberating, It's the thoughts and the thought processes and the beliefs we hold and the things we think about in our day-to-day lives don't mean anything about who we are. We are not our thoughts. We are not our mind. Nothing of this really matters. So many people feel like their dreams matter and their dreams really show the dark side of the moon of who they really are.
Yeah, I get that.
And there's really no validity. There's no reason for you to believe in your dreams. You could easily just use whatever magic mushroom and have the greatest hallucinations of your lifetime, and you're still not entitled to believe that this is who you are. So even if you do whatever bullshit, whatever thought process you go through in your dreams, there's no reason for you to believe that this represents who you are. If you want it to be meaningful, then it can, but it doesn't have to be. Sure. So you really do get to choose. But when in doubt, I'd rather discard whatever you feel proves you're a bad person. Okay. Even the things that go on in your mind. Christianity is really strong on trying to suppress bad feelings, bad predictions, bad behavior, and there is this whole sinner theme around thinking bad thoughts. Right. But this is also only true. The fact that Christianity does this is also a proof of the fact that this is part of our daily experience. It is part of who we really are. It doesn't make you a sinner. If you question yourself about the validity of your thoughts and you come to the conclusion that this really is who you are, then you're going down a really narrow, really dark alley, and this might be one of the points in life where you probably need help to just deconstruct that and understand that this has no validity in the end.
Gotcha. So, tying it all back is we're talking about, perfectionism, imposter. Religion is maybe a rabbit hole we'll go down. That will be a whole podcast in itself, I'm sure.
Maybe 5 podcasts.
Yes. But, talking about not like living up to expectations. So with religion, yeah, if they say, it's equally as bad if you think about doing the sin as doing it, then you're never going to live up to those expectations, because as you're saying with your thoughts, like you could think about so many things, you could think about doing so many things, and most of it's not important. It's more the importance you give to it, and I guess how you react to it.
Right. I still feel like the best way to frame it is about validity. Is this a valid method of understanding who I am? There's many experiences that are shared for basically all of mankind, but many people will just negate or reject that they felt them. So the idea of liking someone you're not supposed to like, or the feeling of walking out of a store that got these really huge metal detectors and you feel like, might I have shoplifted accidentally, or feeling like someone is watching you, there's many experiences that are actually much more shared than we imagine, but people end up not talking about it openly. So, but this means that we suggest to ourselves that our thoughts have validity. It's because people will only show you what they want to show you on Instagram. And if you're comparing yourself to your feet all the time, nobody's gonna show you the shadows. They're only gonna show you their stages.
Got it. With rejection, it would be, you just mentioned not wanting to talk about certain things. We have a lot of shared experiences, but we don't talk about them with each other. We don't express them openly. I would say rejection is very much that too. You could look at someone and say, oh yes, that person's a lot more confident of a person than person B, but just because they look confident doesn't mean that they're also not playing through the rejection scenarios in their head too.
That might even be a strategy to deal with the RSD, right? If they feel like they're confident and they have had past experience that showed them that they have a less of a chance of getting rejected, they're probably gonna put that persona up as well.
Sure. Yeah, whatever persona gets them the most positive reaction.
So let's go to, we've discussed avoidance as a whole topic, and we have discussed perfectionism as one of the escape routes that are obvious for RSD, right? And in the end, all of those will kind of funnel up into avoidance. But let's just touch really quickly on the conflict avoidance. So I have had patients that are participating in some negotiations for mostly equity for large ventures, and they might end up not insisting on their contractually obliged equities and concede millions of dollars just because they don't feel like confronting and not standing up for themselves, even though they are incredible in what they do and really strong in the areas of practice. But just because of the training of people pleasing or the training of conflict avoidance, they will end up conceding more than they should. And this obviously might end up leading to someone that's really great, creative, and a valuable input to not participate in ventures anymore. And there's got to be a really strong motivation for you to overcome this barrier.
But when you say motivation, because one of the things we talked about early on was immediate reward. And we talked about, we have talked about how being able to see like positive progress helps. So when you talk about motivation to overcome the barrier, it's hard when the motivation is only at the end of something, like at the end of a long journey, because you tend to fumble or give up along the way.
You might not be capable of registering your progress, right? If you don't have accountability, or if you don't practice that on a day-to-day basis, if you don't have any means of measuring, if you don't do therapy, if you don't have anyone that holds you accountable or some kind of social contingency, it's going to be really hard for you to keep growing. The best example, even though it's a whole different category of life, is lifting weights. If you don't account for the amount of weight you lifted, the actual weight of the weight and the number of repetitions you're doing, you're not going to progress. So it is really important for you to keep an eye out for the accountability part. And therapy is kind of the hack here. That's the easy way around that, because your therapist is supposed to keep you accountable. Obviously, you have to share what you want to improve, but still.
Sure. That's interesting to think of therapy as an accountability thing, because when you go and, you do the questions of how was your week? How was your X amount of time? The intention is, I want to know how it was, but I also want to know how it was related to the concerns we had before. So we ended on this day with these concerns, this amount of time passed, what's changed from that? And I don't think you think about that as a person day to day. You don't think about that, but having therapy does give you kind of benchmark moments.
I feel like, I know that you and I do this, but the fact that you should use psychometrics in therapy, in psychiatry, and that you should use a portion of your time to see where you're at on the assignments is really crucial. So I'm not sure if you do this the same way, but how I like to think about our patients is to consider kind of 3 levels of concern. So it's really cool to have like a macro idea of where they're going, what they want to achieve, what their long-term goals are, and have a micro version of concrete behaviors you want them to realize in that specific time frame, whatever, and the meso version of a view in the mean term. So having a good understanding of what you're proposing for this week and how it will serve to create a purpose is just fantastic. It really keeps you necessarily on track. But I really do believe that obviously you're going to collaborate with your counselor, your therapist, but you have to insist on having some kind of accountability.
Yeah. Well, and talking about accountability, going back with RSD, do you think or what are the best ways to have yourself or hold yourself accountable in order to get past the RSD barriers? Like, what? Because you talk about holding yourself accountable as in like meeting metrics almost. How does that relate with rejection?
So the most important thing in terms of the therapeutic setup is to think about goals that are feasible. It doesn't really have to be big steps forward, but you gotta focus on going forward. Of course, at some point, you might do some steps backward, but focusing on real life results and being capable of planning those realistically is really important. So this connects to what we talked about, what you called rejection therapy, what I would probably call assertiveness training. If you are capable of going into a shop and ordering something and without consuming or touching whatsoever, capable of changing your mind and telling the person that's talking to you or serving you that you've changed your mind, that's a wonderful first step. And it might sound easy, but it's really not if you're not trained. And there's really, I'm pretty sure that there is also this shared experience of once you live through the situation, we're in a restaurant, let's call it a high-end restaurant, and everybody is really fancy and everybody is really nice and there is a live jazz music, and then when you are with someone at this place and this person manages to be really assertive with the server. Assertive by definition again is not too aggressive and not too passive, and in an assertive manner tells them what your needs are and how they're gonna be met. That's incredible experience, and this is really something that we can look up to and that we might want to aim for. Sure. Those are role models that work nicely.
Understand, yeah. So when you're talking about like changing your mind, I was thinking like small steps of that, like yeah, you order salad and you choose a dressing and then be like, no, I want this other salad dressing. Like small change, like especially when you're looking at restaurants that like they don't mix the salad together, they put the dressing on the side. Like for them to change that little 3 ounces of liquid is nothing, and like, but would be a big step for someone that doesn't stand up for themselves. Or
right. So the important thing is to plan this. You have to know that you're gonna go in there, let's say a Subway or a Kava, and you're saying, okay, I'm gonna have a last minute change of heart, but you're planning this, and you can plan this and time this in a manner that doesn't really cause any trouble to anyone, no wasted material, no wasted whatever, no harm done. And that's the ideal. Those are the ideal first steps. Obviously, we can make it as safe as we can, and it's a good idea to make it as safe as you can just to start off, and try to avoid a bad experience. So maybe it's easier doing this through your DoorDash, your Uber Eats than in real life. Maybe it's easier to write a message to the restaurant directly and make sure they understand that you might still change your mind. Maybe you could do this through a third person or with the help of someone. Maybe you can plan your message accordingly and train it on ChatGPT. Maybe you can do it while your therapist is physically there with you. So there's multiple versions and variations of how to do this, but it's really important to try to find progress and make sure that you have the highest chance of making that a real corrective experience and not another rejection. So when you were talking about the rejection therapy, I feel like that person was really aiming for rejection and trying to get rejection for real.
But you could go all the way up to the small thing of, changing your mind about the topping at a restaurant, things that are simple. There's a large range. It doesn't have to be so intense. You can find things like you said, if you order DoorDash or Uber Eats, you can send messages. You don't have to do it in person even. You have options to start.
And you can even sandbox and fake that experience. You can tell ChatGPT or your therapist to do a role play with you. There's many options to doing this.